Welcome back. The Alliance to End Hunger is an organization that deals with diverse institutions to build the public and political will to end hunger at home and also abroad. Now, the Alliance fosters strategic partnerships overcoming hunger, building political commitment from our leaders, as well as what to do in terms of ending hunger, creating global connections with the UN International Alliance Against Hunger as well. And joining us now to share more details, we're pleased to have for the coalitions and advocacy at Alliance to End Hunger, Minerva Delgado. And Minerva, glad to have you here with us on the Social Justice Forums.
Thank you so much, Daren. Such a pleasure to meet you. And I'm thrilled to be here. The Alliance to End Hunger is in DC, but I'm from the Bronx, so I'm actually extra thrilled to meet you today, and just want to wish you and your viewers happy holidays.
Thank you so much, and glad to have you sharing with us during this holiday season. Walk us through, I gave a little bit of our viewers a little bit of an intro. You talked about being in DC as well as the Bronx, but share with us a little bit more about the work that goes on with the Alliance to End Hunger.
Absolutely. So the Alliance to End Hunger is a multi-sector collaborative. We have about 100 organizations that are part of our collaborative, and they are national nonprofits, international NGOs, corporations, universities, foundations. And so we are sort of the big tent around which organizations can come together to collaborate and advocate against hunger. And, our mission is to unite these diverse sectors to address hunger and malnutrition needs today, but also look forward to solving the root causes of hunger. And I would like to offer a definition. I'm going to use the term hunger because it's very relatable. Everyone understands hunger at a very deep level and what that means. But I'm also talking about food insecurity, which as defined by the US government is lack of access to enough nutritious food to live a healthy, active life. And so what we do at the Alliance is raise awareness around the issues of hunger, both in the United States and around the world. Today, I'll be focusing on hunger in the US. And, at this time of year, I'm so happy that there is a heightened awareness of hunger with Thanksgiving. Around this time, people are really aware that not everyone has enough food around the table. And so we find at this time of year, people love to give to their local food pantries and food charities, and we certainly encourage that. But what we know at the Alliance to End Hunger, and Feeding America will tell us, they're one of the members of the Alliance, and they're the umbrella organizations for food banks and food pantries in the US, is that charity isn't enough. So that for every one bag of groceries that can be distributed through the Feeding America network in the US, SNAP, or food, used to be known as food stamps, can distribute 9. So in other words, charity is important, and we should continue to do all of those charitable efforts to make sure that people who need food today have food today, but it cannot match the power and the reach of the government to solve the issue of hunger in the US. So that's why at the Alliance, we focus on advocacy, and we come together as a coalition to really push, certain measures that will reduce hunger and improve nutrition, as well as, call out the root causes of hunger in the US.
Give me a little bit of an insight as to where we are as far as hunger and food insecurity. We know that there was a huge challenge before COVID, and we know that COVID has further exacerbated the issue of hunger and food insecurity. We saw so many people out receiving food packages, food distributions, things of that nature during the COVID pandemic. And it seems as though for a country that seems to be doing so well in terms of having money and capital, that many of its population still suffers in this area. And that's almost like, unconscionable.
Absolutely, it is unconscionable. It is unacceptable that in such a wealthy nation, even with the challenges we've been going through since the pandemic, that there is still hunger. And so I think we do have to thank you for calling out the pandemic, because we do have to talk about things pre and post pandemic, because the pandemic really was such a significant economic shock, and really did create obviously a health crisis, which impacted millions, but as well as an economic crisis and a hunger crisis. And we did see those long lines of cars, outside of food banks. But the other thing we saw was that people stepped up, just outpouring of support from people who had the resources to assist in those charitable efforts. And that was a really beautiful thing to see. And so food pantries were able to really expand their efforts to help meet that need. But the other thing we saw during the pandemic was Congress and the administration step up in significant ways. And there were a number of things that they did to mitigate the food crisis that we saw. So there were supplies, food supply chain disruptions that we saw, where farmers were not able, because restaurants were closed and schools were closed, were not able to move the food that they would normally move. Food was dying and, just going to waste in the fields. Milk was getting dumped. Well, the government stepped in and created channels for that food to be able to get to needy people. So they did things like that, but they also expanded SNAP benefits, and they made sure to create a new program called Pandemic EBT, which basically said if you had a child in school who normally got free or reduced price lunch, that family, once the school was closed, got the value of those meals to be able to purchase food at the supermarket. So that helped families get through that crisis, because all of a sudden children are home and their food costs went up. Also, we saw food costs go up in general. So there were lots of economic shocks, but measures like that made a huge difference for families, and were really very timely. So definitely want to give credit to Congress and the administration for taking those kinds of steps. They also relaxed a lot of rules around the food distribution programs to make sure that people were able to access SNAP, access WIC, and the other food programs. So where we are right now is that, hunger is still very high, in the sense that there are approximately, almost 40 million people in the US who are suffering from food insecurity. However, what we saw when the USDA measures food insecurity every year, so we have those statistics. What we saw when the statistics for 2020 came out was that the food insecurity rate was not as high as we all feared, because of many of the things that did happen, actions by individuals to step up, as well as actions by Congress and the administration to step up. There's still much to do, because as you mentioned, before the pandemic, we had unacceptable levels of food insecurity in the US. We also have a serious issue of racial inequity when it comes to food. I talk about it as the racial hunger gap. And so I could tell you that if we look at just the sheer numbers of people who are food insecure in the US, the whites will be the largest population based on their numbers. However, if we look at the percent of people within different race populations and that are facing food insecurity, we do see a significant crisis among Black, Indigenous, and communities of color. So Indigenous communities have about 25% food insecure. Black communities have about 22% food insecurity. Latino households have about 18% food insecurity, whereas white households have about 7% food insecurity. And so we do see those racial gaps, which have held historically. And so one of the things that hasn't happened in terms of the recovery of the pandemic is really closing those racial gaps. And luckily, this administration is committed to closing those racial gaps, and we do see some opportunities for improvement in the future. But that has been a significant issue, because structural racism is a root cause of hunger and poverty in communities of color.
Yeah. So taking all that into account, I know that there has to be some recommendations and some things that you as an organization are actually doing. And so I know that one of the things is that Build Back Better plan. And so can you give us a little bit more insight into the Build Back Better plan and how this also plays into the whole issue of hunger and making our our country and our world a better place.
Absolutely. So we are very supportive at the Alliance of the Build Back Better plan. We're so thrilled that the House finally passed what was a 2.2 trillion spending plan. It now has to go over to the Senate. So there's still a tremendous amount of work to do to get this over the finish line. And we are encouraging our allies, the organizations that are part of our network, and just the general public to really support this bill because it has a number of important anti-poverty and anti-hunger provisions. And so the bill itself is huge, and I'm not an expert in the entirety of the bill. A big chunk of it is for battling climate change. There's also which hopefully will, add new jobs to the economy, which we're looking forward to, but also expanded healthcare and improving the social safety net overall. So the bill offers like universal pre-K, establishes subsidies for childcare, establishes a lot more money for housing. And so all of those things, because hunger in the US is an economic issue. We don't have some of the issues that plague countries around the world where they may have conflict that's sort of causing a hunger crisis, or may not have adequate infrastructure to move the food that's grown to the populations and have markets that are working. That's not our issue in the US. In the US, we have enough food, we have markets that work, we have a safety net. What we have is an economic challenge with families whose bills are too high. And so that when they're looking at their housing budget, that the food piece is the most fungible piece. And so they pay the rent first, then they pay the utilities, they pay those medical bills, buy those prescription drugs. And then, what's left over may not always be adequate for nutritious food. And so the fact that this bill will significantly help families economically with all of the different provisions that can provide support for housing, can provide support for childcare, which is significant cost to families, will then free up some money for food. But there are specific nutrition provisions that we are following very closely. I'll mention two. One is expanding what's called summer EBT. So if you know the SNAP program where you get an electronic benefits card to buy groceries, it's the same concept, but specific for summer purchasing meals in the summer. So families that have children that would normally get free or reduced price meals in school, during the summer, they get a boost in benefits, because when children are out of school, they're struggling to make sure that those children have nutritious food. And so there have been some pilot projects. This has been happening in a few states, and it's been very successful with children eating more nutritious foods during the summer and being ready to learn when they go back to school in the fall. So one of the provisions is to expand this program nationwide for 2 years, so that those families with children who get free or reduced price meals have that support during the summer. This would be a game changer, because summer is the hungriest time for children. And so that one is very significant, and we really hope it passes all the way to the end. And then the other piece that I'll mention is, I'm not going to get too technical with it, but there is an opportunity to expand the number of schools across the country that can offer free meals to students. And this would be a 5-year provision. And in addition, states would have the option to make school meals free statewide. And so, being from New York City, I'm actually proud to be part of an organization that was behind free school meals for New York City's children, Community Food Advocates. So this has been happening now in New York City for a while, and we've seen the benefits. Schools have less administrative burdens. Parents have to put out less, from their pockets, and it's, they don't have the administrative burdens of filling out the school meal forms. But also, children are eating more meals at school, and these are healthy meals. They're getting better grades because they're better able to concentrate in school. So we're really excited about this passing the Senate, and the opportunity for New York State to be able to do this statewide and not just in New York City. So those are two that I'll mention that we're really excited about. But of course, we're excited about things like the child tax credit and other things that will give families more money in their pocket to be able to take care of their families.
Yeah, so much to talk about. We have to bring it back and really go a little bit more in depth. I know you got a playbook and some other things that we really can't get into now, but I do want to get a quick projection from you before we leave. Talk to me just a quick second, because I only have about a minute left, about hunger in 2022. Do we see things getting better, or do we see things getting progressively worse?
I think things are getting better. We have a new administration. They have actually reformulated the SNAP benefit to make sure that the actual benefit better meets food costs. So good things are happening, but we really need this Build Back Better plan to pass to make some really significant changes that would be game changers for families and make sure that families and children have the access to nutrition that they need.
Well, one, thank you so much for being with us, Minerva, and sharing with us a little bit about your organization and the work that you continue to do. Of course, a lot to talk about. We'll see you in the new year and find out how things are going.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure. Again, happy holidays.
And happy holidays to you as well. For our viewers, I want you to stay with us. We are going to take a break, and after the break, we'll have another very special guest here on the Social Justice Forum.